Every day, this little boy would go to the shade of an old oak tree, with no one knowing he was conversing with God. In a secluded corner of the countryside, where time seemed to slow and nature's mysteries intertwined with age-old legends, Tommy, a boy with penetrating eyes and a sensitive soul, grew up under the teachings of Grandma Eleanor, his grandmother, who guided him with stories about faith and traditional customs. From a very young age, Tommy felt drawn to a venerable oak tree in the backyard of the modest house where his family lived. The tree, with its sprawling branches and leaves that whispered memories of bygone days, became a sanctuary where the transcendent appeared in the simplest expressions of life. Every afternoon, the boy sought refuge in the shade of that oak, where, in a silent and profound dialogue, he communicated with the divine, attributing to God the role of a confidant who listened without judgment. His conversations, filled with curiosity and humility, questioned the meaning of existence, the mystery of creation, and the enigmas of human suffering, offering answers that, though silent, seemed woven by the very heart of nature. While many of his peers engaged in fleeting pastimes, Tommy saw in his communion with the Creator a path to understanding the great challenges that beset the small rural town, where scarcity, harsh weather, and daily hardships demanded an unwavering faith. He would gaze at the sky through the gnarled branches of the old oak and feel, in the quiet of those afternoons, that his words were carried by the wind to ears that truly understood the sorrows of his young heart. "Why do men suffer so much, God?" he would ask on one of those afternoons, his fingers tracing imaginary patterns on the rough trunk of the tree. "Why does my father come home with calloused hands and a lost look, as if life has taken more from him than just his sweat?" The silence that followed his questions was not empty. Rather, it was filled with the rustle of leaves, the distant song of birds, and the gentle breeze that caressed his face, as if it were the very hand of the Creator, offering comfort. Tommy had learned to interpret these signs, to listen with his heart to what his ears could not capture. This spontaneous devotion aroused both admiration and suspicion among the townsfolk. Mr. Joseph, the erudite elder with an open mind, recognized in the boy the purity of a feeling that society had long forgotten, and he would accompany Tommy in dialogues that blended ancient teachings with the hope embedded in every word whispered by the wind. "You know, boy," Mr. Joseph would say on an afternoon when the clouds seemed to paint stories across the sky, "there are those who spend their entire lives searching for God in far-off places, in grand cathedrals, in sacred books, without realizing that He is closer than the very air we breathe. You, with your pure soul, have found what many wise men may never discover." Tommy's eyes shone with that affirmation, not out of vanity, but as a confirmation of something his heart had always known. True faith required no intermediaries, that divine love was as accessible as the fragrance of the wildflowers that occasionally bloomed among the oak's branches. At the same time, Mrs. Clarice, a strict neighbor and advocate of formal rituals, viewed Tommy's expressions of faith with critical eyes, insisting that a true encounter with God should take place within the solemn walls of a church and not beneath the shade of an ancient tree, believing that the spontaneity of a child could lead to misguided ideas about sanctity and proper customs. "This boy is straying from the right path," she would say after Sunday services, her words as sharp as the needles with which she sewed dresses for her daughter. "Talking to God under a tree? That isn't faith, it's superstition. The word of the Lord should be heard in the temple, guided by those chosen to interpret His messages." Such criticisms fell upon Tommy like pebbles tossed into a still pond, creating momentary ripples but never disturbing the depth of his belief. He did not deny the importance of the church, of rituals, or of collective prayers. He simply felt that his connection with the divine flowed more authentically in that space where the sky felt nearer, and his tears could fall freely, unburdened by the weight of judgmental stares. Even though the clash of these views generated tension and scrutinizing glances, Tommy's routine remained steadfast, rooted in the conviction that every falling leaf, every passing breeze, and every soft sound of nature were signs from the divine, inviting him to reflect on the importance of forgiveness, the resilience, in the face of hardship and the transformative power of hope. One afternoon, as the sun began to set behind the rolling hills that embraced the small town, painting the sky in hues of orange and red reminiscent of the apocalyptic tales Grandma Eleanor recounted on winter nights, Tommy faced one of the most painful moments of his young life. The air felt heavier, laden with omens, and even the birds, usually so melodious at that hour, remained respectfully silent, as if they sensed the approaching tragedy. His father, a man of few words and many calluses, hands so marked by the soil that they seemed to have sprouted from it like ancient roots, returned home with the news that their harvest had been devastated by an unexpected storm. The man's usually steadfast eyes now overflowed with a helplessness that pierced the boy's heart. "How will we survive now?" his father murmured, more to himself than to the family gathered around the simple table. "Everything we planted, everything we tended with such care, taken away by wind and rain in just one night." That very night, as the house was engulfed in a silence as heavy as lead, Tommy slipped out the back door and ran to the oak, his sacred refuge. The moon, partly veiled by persistent clouds, cast a dim light over the yard, transforming the tree into a ghostly silhouette against the night sky. "Why, my God?" he asked, his voice choked and his knees sinking into the damp earth. "Why do you let good people like my father suffer so? He works from sunrise to sunset. His hands bear the marks of the soil. He has never wronged anyone. And now, everything he built has been destroyed in one night." The boy let his tears flow freely, like rivers finally finding their way to the sea after a long, restrained journey. His small body trembled, not only from the night's chill but from the intensity of his pain, from the anguish of witnessing the suffering etched on the faces of those he loved most. Then, in the midst of his despair, Tommy felt something different. It wasn't an audible voice nor an extraordinary vision, but a presence, a mysterious certainty that seemed to well up from deep within him and expand, enveloping him like a cloak woven with threads of light. It was as if the very tree, a silent witness to his sorrow, was imparting ancient wisdom, a knowledge that transcended words and touched his soul directly. The message, engraved more in his heart than in his ears, was clear. The storm that had ruined the crop was neither a punishment nor a sign of divine abandonment. It was part of a larger cycle, a cosmic balance that men, with their limited understanding, could not always grasp. The very rain that had destroyed the current harvest was preparing the soil for a new planting, for more abundant fruits in the future. That night, under the silent gaze of the stars, Tommy received not only comfort but also a mission, to be the bearer of hope, the guardian of faith in dark times. He understood that his special connection with the divine was not a privilege to be enjoyed in solitude, but a gift to be shared, a light to be spread in the shadows of despair. The next morning, as the first rays of sun began to gild the devastated fields, the boy surprised his family by rising before everyone else, preparing a simple cup of coffee, and serving it to his father with a serene smile on his face. "Dad," he said in a voice that carried a newfound maturity, "last night, I spoke with God under the oak. He showed me that this storm is not the end, but the beginning of something new. The land is stronger now, washed by the rain and ready to receive new seeds." His father looked at him with a mixture of surprise and skepticism. Could the words of a child really bring comfort in the face of such tangible, overwhelming loss? "And how do you know this, son?" he asked, his voice hoarse from a sleepless night. "I felt it, Dad. Like I feel the smell of wet earth after rain. Like I feel the warmth of the sun on my skin. Some things you can't see with your eyes, but you know deep inside," Tommy replied, placing a hand over his chest. Something in the boy's conviction and the calm of his gaze softened his hardened heart. It was not blind faith based on empty promises, but a profound certainty rooted in a connection that, in his practical and rational life, he might never fully understand. In the days that followed, Tommy not only maintained his conversations with God beneath the old oak, but also began sharing the reflections born of those encounters with the community. He did so not with arrogance or a claim to spiritual superiority. Rather, he offered his words as one might share a slice of bread in times of scarcity, with humility and a sincere desire to alleviate others' suffering. The venerable oak, a silent witness to the passage of time, assumed the role of an eternal symbol. Its deep roots held the stories and wisdom of generations, just as they sustained the faith of the boy who, with simplicity and boldness, chose to listen to the secrets of the universe. Some began to notice that the tree, once merely a familiar part of the landscape, now emanated a different energy, as if every leaf, every branch, every acorn was part of a greater message, a code decipherable only by the most sensitive of hearts. In the quiet intervals of his reflections, Tommy felt embraced by an invisible hug that revealed life, even amid hardship and the rigidity of convention, could be transformed by the capacity to love and dream. It was as if time, beneath the tree's shelter, obeyed different laws, expanding to accommodate the depth of his thoughts and contracting when reality demanded a return to the everyday. Every leaf that moved with the wind seemed to carry a coded message, a fragment of ancient wisdom that only he could unravel in his silent contemplation. On the hottest hours of the day, when the entire town sought refuge in the shade of their homes, Tommy remained steadfast under the oak's boughs, as if the scorching sun could not touch his soul, safeguarded by the sacred aura of that cherished communion. The confidences he shared with the presence he called God were marked by the sincerity of a heart devoid of pretenses, demonstrating that true spirituality does not reside in rehearsed prayers or rigid dogmas, but in the natural flow of feeling and the courage to question the mysteries of existence. There was no solemnity of sermons or rigidity of doctrine in his words, only the ease of a conversation between close friends, between a son and a loving father who understands and forgives all. "Sometimes I'm afraid, Lord," he confessed one particularly hot afternoon, when the sun seemed intent on testing the endurance of all living things. "I'm afraid that people won't understand what I feel, that they'll see me as strange, different. I know Mrs. Clarice thinks I'm wrong for seeking you here, under this tree, instead of in the church on Sundays." The gentle breeze that stirred the oak's leaves at that moment seemed to carry a response. "My child, the most sacred temple is the sincere heart. Those who seek me with love will find me, whether beneath the roof of a cathedral or under the branches of a tree." The drought that followed the devastating storm was one of the harshest the region had ever faced. The streams, once abundant, turned into parched scars upon the land. The fields, once lush, assumed the color of scorched straw, and the animals, thirsty, wandered in search of water and shade. This scarcity brought not only physical hunger but also a hunger of the soul, the kind that manifests in the loss of hope, the abandonment of faith, and the hardening of the heart. In this desolate scenario, Tommy's bond with the divine was put to its ultimate test. Mrs. Clarice's earlier criticisms now found resonance in other voices in the community. "What use is this boy talking to God if the land remains dry and our children still go hungry?" some would ask. "Perhaps it is divine punishment for allowing such misguided worship," others would suggest, their accusing stares directed at the boy's family. The weight of these judgments fell upon Tommy's small shoulders like unyielding stones. For the first time, he felt his long-held certainty waver. Could he be mistaken? Were his conversations beneath the oak nothing more than the fanciful musings of a lonely child, rather than the sacred communion he believed he had found? One night, overwhelmed by these doubts, Tommy dreamed. In his dream, the old oak was covered with luminous white flowers that exuded an indescribable fragrance. From each blossom, a drop of crystalline water emerged that, upon touching the soil, transformed it into fertile earth. A voice, as if coming from everywhere and nowhere at once, said, "True faith does not fear the desert, for beneath the driest sands runs a river of life." He awoke with a racing heart and renewed certainty. It no longer mattered what others thought or said. His mission was to keep the flame of hope alive, even when all around him saw only the darkness of despair. The following morning, Tommy went to the old oak as usual, But this time he was not alone. His father, moved by his son's unwavering faith even in the face of adversity, decided to join him. Together they sat in silence beneath the tree, each lost in their own thoughts and prayers. "Dad," the boy finally said, "I know many do not believe, that they think I'm crazy or being misled. But I feel deep inside that God listens to me when I speak to him under this oak." His father looked into his son's eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of many lifetimes, and felt something break within him. Not painfully, but as though a hard shell were cracking to allow something new to emerge. "Son," he replied, his voice thick with emotion, "I spent my life believing that faith was something distant, reserved for the educated, for those who understood sacred texts and knew the proper prayers. But I see in you something different, something that makes me question everything I once believed. If God truly speaks to you through this tree, then ask him for a sign, not to prove you right to others, but to strengthen our own faith in these trying times." Tommy closed his eyes for a moment, plunging into that special state of communion he had learned to access over the years. His small body seemed to radiate an inner light, almost imperceptible to ordinary eyes, yet evident to those who knew how to listen with their hearts. The gentle breeze rustling through the oak's branches caressed his hair like a comforting maternal touch. For a few moments, all the sounds around them ceased, as if nature itself held its breath so as not to disturb that sacred dialogue. When he opened his eyes again, they shone with a calm determination, as if he had received clear instructions for an important mission. "We need to dig," he said simply. "Dig? Dig where, son?" "Right here, Dad. Under the oak." God showed me that there is water flowing beneath our feet, a hidden stream untouched by the drought. If we dig deep enough, we will not only find water for our family, but for the whole community. His father hesitated, torn between trust in his son and the rational belief that finding water where even the deepest wells had failed was impossible. Years of battling the barren land had taught him harsh lessons about dashed hopes and unfulfilled promises. His calloused hands trembled slightly as he weighed the decision in his heart. Was it cruel to nurture an illusion only to see disappointment again on the faces of those he loved? Was it wise to expend the little strength he had left on a search seemingly doomed to fail? Yet something in the boy's gaze, a conviction that transcended common logic, a serenity born of a deeper well of understanding, compelled him to rise, grab a shovel and begin to dig. The work was arduous, exhausting under the relentless sun. Other men from the town, drawn by the unusual sight, gathered, some to help, moved by a final thread of hope, others to mock, convinced they were witnessing the inevitable failure of one who dared claim to speak with God under a tree. Mrs. Clarice also arrived, her face a mask of disapproval. "You're wasting your precious strength on this folly," she warned, hands firmly planted on her hips. "Water will only return when we pray as we should, in the church, following the rituals our forefathers taught us." But Tommy and his father continued digging tirelessly, their hands forming blisters that soon burst, leaving raw skin exposed to the rough wood. The sun arced across the sky and began its descent beyond the horizon, yet they persisted, now illuminated only by the silvery light of the waxing moon. It was when the night had fully settled, deep and starry, that Tommy's father's shovel suddenly struck something softer, a distinct layer beneath the hard earth. And then, as if a long-awaited blessing, water began to trickle out, at first timidly, then in increasing gushes that soon formed a small pool around the hole. The news spread through the town like wildfire. Entire families rushed to the spot, first in disbelief, then overcome with almost delirious joy as they witnessed what had seemed impossible. Fresh, abundant water emerging from the barren ground. Gradually, the legend of the boy who conversed with the divine spread, stirring both curiosity and reverence, while generations came to see in Tommy an example that faith could manifest spontaneously and purely, unbound by dogma or predetermined rituals. The small spring that had emerged beneath the oak never dried up, even during the harshest seasons, becoming a pilgrimage site for people from all around. Even amid clashing ideals, the boy continued his journey, nurturing the community's hope, with every silent word that seemed to echo in the breeze and blend with the murmur of the oak. His story, a tale of simplicity and inner strength, became an invitation for everyone to learn that the essence of the divine can be found in communion with nature, in the pure gaze of a child, and in the courage to keep the flame of faith alive, even when life's narrow paths impose obstacles and challenges. As the years passed and Tommy grew into a young man and later a mature adult, his connection with the old oak and the divine it represented never waned. He continued to visit that sacred place regularly, not alone, but accompanied by others seeking counsel, comfort, or simply the peace that emanated from that special spot. Mrs. Clarice, who had once harshly criticized his practices, eventually yielded to the evidence that genuine faith can manifest in ways that transcend established traditions. In her later years, it was common to see her seated beside Tommy under the generous shade of the oak, her lips moving in silent prayer, her face softened by time and a newfound serenity. "You know, dear," she once said, her wrinkled hands resting on his, "I spent my life believing that God could only be found within consecrated walls, in specific rituals, in exact words. How wrong I was. He is here, in this tree, in the air we breathe, in the warmth of the sun and the cool of the night. He is in every heart that opens to him, no matter which path is chosen." Tommy smiled, gently squeezing the elderly woman's hand. It's never too late to discover new ways to love, Mrs. Clarice. What matters is not the path we choose, but the sincerity with which we walk it. Thus, Tommy's story became a living parable, an enduring lesson that the sacred does not dwell solely in temples or formal rituals, but in nature, in the quiet of sincere words, and above all in the ability to listen with one's heart to that which goes beyond the senses. This intimate bond with the universe and the Creator inspired not only the young but also the elders, who, through the example of the boy, rediscovered the power of genuine faith and the beauty of a love expressed in simplicity, a love that united hearts and renewed hope in a community marked by everyday challenges and the need to find the divine in the simplest of things. And when many years later, Tommy, now an elderly man with white hair and a serene smile, closed his eyes for the last time, legend has it that the old oak bloomed out of season, covering itself with white flowers that exuded an indescribable fragrance, exactly like in the dream he had in his youth. His body was laid to rest beneath that very tree, at his own request, so that his essence might continue to nourish the roots that had long supported his faith. But Tommy's true legacy was not found in the tree, nor in the spring that never ran dry, nor even in the stories told about him. It resided in the hearts that learned, through his example, that true spirituality is born of authenticity, the courage to question, the humility to listen, and above all, the capacity to perceive the divine in the most simple, everyday manifestations of life. And even today, those most attuned say that when someone sits beneath that old oak with a truly open heart, it is possible to hear a whisper among the leaves, as if Tommy himself were there, continuing his eternal conversations with the Creator, and inviting all to partake in that sacred dialogue that transcends time, space, and human limitations.